Okay, one more thing that I want to touch on before we dive into the nitty gritty is I mentioned this in the last video, but I just want to talk about it really quick here. Before I started making this class, I did a lot of research into other film scoring classes that are out there. And what I wanted to do was teach a film scoring class that was kind of like the film scoring classes I teach in college sometimes. But none of them really existed. I was kind of just seeing what was out there, and all I could find was stuff that was really focused on the tech behind writing music for film. So if you have done some research and found other film scoring classes, they're probably focused on the tech or the process. So the tech meaning what software to use, sample libraries, things like that. Things not really related to writing music necessarily, right? Like they're about what to do once you've written music is kind of what they tend to mostly be about, everything I could find. But when I'm in a college classroom, what we're doing is we write something. I have the students write something. We listen to it. We evaluate it as a class. We say what worked, what didn't work. And what I found was there's probably a really good reason that this doesn't exist as an online class, because you can't do that thing. You can't go back and forth and say this works, that doesn't work. So I'm kind of going into uncharted waters here. I'm going to really try to make a class that really focuses on how to write the music for the film. We're going to look at a lot of examples. I'm going to show you some that work. I'm going to show you some that don't work, and we'll talk about why they don't work. And hopefully what I'll be doing in this class is really filling the gap between not a class focused on tech, but a class focused on how to actually write the music. And then you can take a class focused on tech, and it'll make a lot more sense. Or maybe I'll make one of my own. I don't know. Now, I know we just talked about tech and tools and how to use it, but that's about as deep as we're going into that. I'm not going to talk about how to use Logic, how to use Ableton Live, how to use any of those things. I have separate classes on how to use Ableton Live quite extensively. So if you want to get into that, take those other classes of mine, and you will become an expert at using some of these pieces of software that we can then use for film scoring. So with that, let's move on and talk about just straight up dive headfirst right into emotional response. And what we're talking about here is how do we figure out the emotional response we're looking for, and then how do we translate that into music? And to add a more complicating factor, something you never have to deal with when you're just writing music on your own, which is what is the emotional response that the director wants? Because when we're writing music, we are kind of we have to answer to somebody. When we're writing film music, I should say. When we're writing music just on our own, we don't. We're the boss. But in film music, we have another person to please, and sometimes many other people to please. So let's get into that up next.